All right, hello, and thank you for tuning in to our Tech-Strong Learning Experience, where I'm joined with BigPanda. I do have a couple of quick housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded. It will be available on demand afterward, and we will send you a link to the recording once we conclude. On the right side of your screen, you'll see that we do have the chat, Q&A, survey, and resources. So be sure to share your experiences, your comments, your understanding on today's topic in the chat. Use the Q&A for questions at any time. Make sure that you put them in there before the end of the program, and any questions that we're not able to get to today, we want to make sure that we can reach out to you at the end of the program, or after we conclude. And you'll see that we've got some pop-ups for resources. I'm going to add those same links into the chat for you as well. And make sure to fill out the survey at any time throughout the presentation. Your input is invaluable to us. And with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's topic. We've got fewer incidents, measurable ROI, a new standard for IT change in governance. Today I'm joined with Katie Petrillo, Senior Director of Product Marketing at BigPanda, and Travis Carlson, Staff Product Manager at BigPanda. Katie, Travis, thank you so much for joining us today. Go ahead and take it away from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. Appreciate it. Looking forward to our conversation today. Today, as Jared was mentioning, we're going to be talking a little bit about the current state of IT change management, CAB processes, some of the challenges that come along with that, and then also really what do we see as the future of change management, particularly with the onset of AI, and just how we at BigPanda are really looking to reimagine and transform change management. And then we'll get into a demo with Travis looking at how we're doing change risk management and change analytics. And then we'll share a couple of success stories from the customers that we've been working with, so you can kind of hear some of those results live. Jared just introduced ourselves, but I'm Katie Petrillo. I'm Senior Director of Product Marketing here at BigPanda. Have been here for around 2.5 years. Really excited to see the evolution of the product and really be able to take on AI in the last couple of years and see how that's been able to evolve and transform our customers' environments, which is really exciting. And Travis.
Yeah, sorry. I'm Travis Carlson, and I'm the Staff Product Manager here for Incident Prevention at BigPanda.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, with that, let's just jump right into things. I wanted to start with talking a little bit about just kind of the state of change management processes as we see them today. They were essentially built for a bygone era, if you will. Both the CAB, the change management review and approval process, these processes were built part of IT service management 20 plus years ago, and were built for a very different looking world and environment, right? Organizations at that time were working through, much less frequent release cycles. The architectures were looking much different. I love this term of monolithic architectures. There were fewer changes going through or being approved as a result of the slower and less frequent release cycles. In general, there was just a much smaller footprint of the infrastructure that you were looking to be able to maintain a sense of, especially when you're approving those changes. That's very different from what we're seeing today, where we have organizations that are built on these really, have transformed into these digital hybrid cloud architectures, right? Bringing in more of these cloud native services, microservices, containers, all of that all brings in and delivers this sort of very complex and dynamic infrastructure with significant amount of data, with also greater expectations from the customer end. So deployment and production is happening at a higher rate. So they're looking to be able to do multiple deployments, hundreds of deployments per day. You have these CI/CD pipelines that are running continuously, right? All of this creates a very different world than what the world of CABs and IT change management processes were built for nearly 20 years ago. And all of this has created somewhat of a friction, I would say, between what the CAB stands for, your change advisory board, and what many of these, digital native or hybrid digital organizations want to be doing today, which is be able to move fast, right? You want to be able to deliver innovation at the pace of business, right? Many organizations want to be seen as they're able to deliver this high velocity. And as part of that, they're saying, well, maybe I don't need to follow this change process, or maybe I don't need to go through that CAB approval process, right? So there's this idea of moving fast. But the CAB is designed to be able to sort of slow down. We need to look through all of these changes, make sure we analyze them and understand the full risk in order for us to be able to say, like, this is approved to go forward, or to be able to, we need to stop that from going through. And that is what is needed in order to be able to say, this is how we can protect the service reliability of all of these services, right? And acknowledging that that's the cost could be slowing down, but it's also one that will help protect that services. But I think what we're seeing is that's not actually the reality. And many of these CABs are looking and tracking at metrics that actually are not necessarily indicative of sort of health of the services and health of innovation and health of reliability. CABs are looking at things of how many changes did we approve, right? Looking at that from a volume perspective. So it's, great, we've been very efficient. But I think what's missing from that number, when you look at it that way, is, well, how many of those changes, how many of those approved changes actually resulted in an incident? Because if that's a high number, that high volume of approved changes isn't a good thing, because it shows that something is going wrong in that approval process and you missed something. Looking at things like meeting duration. Well, our CAB is meeting on a 3 times a week or 5 times a week basis. And so that must be successful because we're looking at all those things. But again, how many incidents are you still seeing coming from a change, even though you had a lot of people getting in a room 5 times a week for an hour to review changes? If that's still high, that's not quite effective. Then you also look at how many incidents have occurred, right? And that's also looking at, well, what's the sort of noise level that's hitting this IT operations team? But again, of those incidents that are happening, how many of them were a result of a change? And then, of course, just what was that change approval time? How quickly were we able to actually approve it? My question would then be, well, okay, of those that you did approve and were noted as low or medium risk, how many of those actually did end up resulting in some sort of an incident? Just sort of showing that just because something is approved quickly doesn't necessarily, and approved as a low or medium risk, doesn't mean that it's actually minimal impact to the business. So there's a little bit of a disconnect here, in addition to that friction between, your production, your development teams, and your CAB teams that we talked about on the last slide. And I think all of this together has sort of led to what I would say is a false confidence problem with IT change management in the way that it stands today, right? And that is getting reflected in the fact that many of the organizations that we work with at BigPanda are still seeing the majority of their IT incidents are triggered by changes. This is not changed, really. This is something that we've seen stats for many years, and we're really seeing up to 80% of those IT incidents caused by changes, despite the fact that they're still going through that CAB process and going through that approval process. And so you start to think, well, what's missing here? And still, so much time is spent on CABs, 4.5 hours a week as being the average. And I would say that's probably a relatively low number. We work with customers that are meeting 5 days a week. There's 80 people on that for an hour, and that not everyone's time is effective there, right? And then even still, they're still seeing numbers of up to 80%.
Hey, Katie, I think we lost your audio.
Okay, how about now?
Yep, you're back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then the last piece here, just around the process is not working when we find that our engineers are actually doing what they can to be able to go around these CAB and change management processes, right? If they're trying to put their changes in as low risk, trying to get around the CAB altogether, like, it shows that not necessarily that organization has a problem. This is a broken process. This all goes back to what we talked about on that first slide, that the CAB that was the structure that CAB was built for is not the reality of today's organization. And that is really delivering a lot of the challenges that we see today. But what the good news is we're starting to see things shift, right? Especially with AI and agentic capabilities coming and becoming more common within IT technology. We're starting to see organizations starting to look at their change management processes in a different way, right? And that's what we really want to talk about and enlighten you to today, is that there is a better way to do this that is going to be able to help your teams to be able to move fast, your development teams to be able to move quickly, push out those changes, while also giving your IT team the confidence that the changes that are getting submitted and requested are truly low or medium risk, and isolate only those high risk ones so you can spend just your time on that, and do so in a very quantifiable way, which now we're able to do with AI, where we're able to take all of this massive information and be able to deliver AI-based risk assessment so that you're able to assess risk before it ever gets to that CAB. So it's not a human-driven conversation about, well, I think this change looks like this, or it's just very judgment and human-driven as it is today. But with AI, you're able to remove that human judgment from the process and eliminate just that human bottleneck and really be able to evaluate risk in a quantifiable way. And the way we can do that is by analyzing a breadth of data and knowledge about past historical incidents, past changes, individual and team behavior, to be able to deliver a data-driven risk score that says this change has a risk score of 85 or 35. And here is why. Here's the reasoning why. And then also be able to deliver, here's what the potential remediation is. Using all of that breadth of data and knowledge, and using that to get that risk score in a quantifiable way, again, just takes that judgment out of it. And then when you do that for every single change at scale, you start to build up this really strong foundation of feedback that you can refer to going forward, right? So your AI is starting to learn from every single change that you're seeing, every single incident you're seeing. And so that organization just gets smarter and smarter with every single change approval that gets sent out, or every single CAB approval, every single change risk score that gets identified. And so that's this idea of sort of using AI to be able to analyze a breadth of knowledge and data from across your IT infrastructure to be able to power your change risk management process is the foundation of what we're doing here at BigPanda. We're talking about that today within our AI Incident Prevention product, which helps to ultimately be able to reduce the number of incidents. If we go back to that 80% of IT incidents caused by change, we can reduce that significantly with change risk scores, as you're going to see from Travis when he shows you that. So if we're able to reduce that risk volume, that incident volume overall, we're reducing the number of tickets that ever need to be viewed by that NOC and IT operations team. We're delivering those tickets that that do get surfaced and prioritized with full and rich context, and so that those teams can actually be able to take action faster and more accurately, because we're bringing together all of that rich data and knowledge. And then, of course, when you do have incidents that do need to be escalated to a major, a P1, a SEV1, whatever that might be for in your organization, we're helping to be able to automate the orchestration and investigation of those incidents, all at scale. And then all of this information, that idea of continuous improvement, doesn't just apply to IT change management, but all of that information goes into the foundation and can be used to inform and make better decisions the next time you're experiencing a major or investigating a similar incident or doing triage, whatever that might be. And all of that comes down to our IT knowledge graph. And that IT knowledge graph is the foundation of what lets all of this to be able to work and sing as we're talking about it. And it really comes down to having, not just traditional structured data that we have, really typically used to inform, what's an incident or what's this change risk score by looking at, observability and CMDB data. But we can now, with AI, not go far beyond just that structured data. We can look at semi-structured, completely unstructured data, and AI can analyze and reason across all of that and be able to surface patterns and identify, dependencies and connections that we were never able to do first with any sort of rules-based configuration or automation, and also was really beyond human capacity, just because of the sheer volume of all of this data that is now available in these really complex hybrid environments that many large enterprises are operating on. And with our IT knowledge graph, that really goes into kind of 4 different flavors of that data. Number 1 is like all of that observability that is quite traditional, but also like what else is going on in your service desk? What's going on outside of your organization? Really giving you that situational awareness of like what's happening right now, right? Also, what's happened in the past. That historical context is critical for change risk assessments. And so we need those incident records and change logs. The postmortems detailing exactly what happened in recent major incidents is critical. Also having a sense of topological context. Now I have a sense of what's happening and have we seen this in the past, but how is it all connected? Looking at service maps and the CMDB and these dependency relationships that can be inferred through AI to be able to understand the full impact of something. And then the real magic comes in with the organizational context. Now, as a IT change manager or an L1 operator or a major incident manager, what do I need to do about it? Now you understand who actually owns this, who is responsible for this, is there actually a run book? So now you know how the organization works to be able to resolve this at scale. So now you have done everything from understanding the incident, to what's happening now, what's happened in the past, how is it all connected, and then what do I need to do to be able to resolve it? This knowledge graph is the foundation for IT change management and incident prevention at BigPanda, as well as our entire platform. And you'll see that come to life when Travis goes through the demo. And the 2 main things you're really going to see from him is number 1, change risk management, which is our where we have AI to be able to analyze historical incidents and historical changes and past behaviors to be able to identify a comprehensive risk assessment of a change. We give that a score. We provide deep reasoning as to why that score has it, why that change has that score. What is the remediation steps? And then what is that potential impact based on that score itself? And then we'll do all of that also in the analytics dashboard. So not just necessarily for one particular incident that you're working on, but being able to analyze changes at scale across your organization so that you're actually able to identify trends over time, to be able to monitor success and effectiveness of your change program. If you have certain, if low or medium score risks continue to be causing incidents, why is that? Understanding those problems that continually can keep coming up, as well as being able to look at, potential conflict-based risks that could be coming up based on what other ongoing incidents are coming up, what's like the real-time CI context, if there's other open problems that are related. So having this deep view and being able to analyze that in real time, dynamically, as things are happening across your infrastructure is really critical to be able to help to be able to prevent these changes from causing impact on production. And while this, obviously, while this matters is really important, and I think there's the number 1 is that it's going to come down to really being able to reduce the overall incident volume that your organization is seeing. So we want to be able to prevent and reduce that 80% number we talked about earlier to something that is much lower. If we can reduce the number of change-related incidents, we're going to have a significant impact on your organization. And then also just to be able to empower production, developers and change owners to really be able to foresee these issues before they actually go into production and take action proactively. So we're not spending time reactively, fighting these incidents, but getting ahead of them. And then also this office is an opportunity to really drive continuous improvement across the organization. We're talking a lot about the IT side, but this also unlocks those production and development teams so that they're actually able to deliver changes and code at a higher rate than they would be, when they're forced to go through the manual cab process. And then, of course, making that cab more effective. If they have something like the dashboard that you're going to see from Travis at their disposal as sort of the source of truth for those cab meetings become a lot more efficient, a lot more accurate, much less about who wants their change to get pushed through and more about the facts. We have many customers that have been using AI incident prevention, and they're seeing that. We work with a hospitality enterprise, and they have seen over a quarter reduction in their major incident volume, which is also in the last year, and that has also translated to a reduction in MTTR of those incidents as well. So some great gains there. If we have time, hopefully we'll be able to talk through some of those additional proof customer stories after Travis's demo. But with that, I'll stop talking and I'll hand this over to Travis to jump into his demo. Oh, we can't hear you, Travis.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. Let me get my screen share going here and we'll jump into our demo. All right, we'll give that a second. Hopefully you guys can see now the change risk dashboard that I'm showing on my screen. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger here. And so this is the change risk dashboard that Katie was mentioning. This is where within our web application, you can see all of the changes that we have risk rated. You're able to see these kind of into the future. You can also look back in the past. So I've got this looking into my next 30 days worth of time. And a couple of things, I've got down below here all the different changes we've risk rated for the next 30 days for my organization. And I went ahead and sorted these by the ones with the highest risk score. Before I click into this first one that's got kind of that 84 out of 100 risk score, I just want to show one other thing, which is in addition to risk rating, we also do real-time deconfliction. So we're looking at other things that are happening, other signals that could cause conflicts and issues with changes you're about to push. The last thing you want to do is push a change only to find out that maybe the CI or the business service that you're pushing that for has an ongoing major incident, right? So this is looking at a number of different things. It's looking at incidents that are maybe ongoing for those CIs or business services. It's looking at other changes that are being pushed in the same time frame. It's looking to see were there unsuccessfully changes pushed recently to the CI or to the business service. So we can see here a couple of examples. Here's one where we have overlaps. So we have got two different changes that are being pushed at roughly the same time. And it's two different owners. So we've got one is owned by Leo Clark, the other is Raghav Chopra here. And so, the key thing here is, hey, these two folks are pushing changes to the same affected CI here. Let's make sure that they both know that they're pushing these changes, they're coordinating. We don't want something to happen where, because of these changes, that causes some sort of incident. So this is helping to surface some of those variables and things there for your teams. And you can look up to the next 48 hours out and just see what change conflicts are occurring. And then how important or how critical are they to make sure that your teams are aware of everything that's going on that could impact the changes they're trying to push. Now, let's get back to this change that we said is critical risk. So what's going on here? If I click into this, we'll see the change details. And what we see here is kind of the change details that would come from your ITSM, like ServiceNow. But the real meat of what we've done on the BigPanda side is this risk assessment here. And so if I click the details here, that'll take me over to my risk prediction tab. And this is where we show really the detail behind that score. So we actually do the risk assessment across 5 different categories. We're looking at implementation risk, meaning, how well documented is your change plan? What type of change is it? Is it a simple change or something more complicated? We look at the topological impact risk. So what parts of the environment are you affecting? What CIs are they? What services, and how important or critical are they to your business? We're looking at the team and individual risk. So we're looking at the kind of the track record, the reliability of the change owner. How often do they push changes? When they push changes, how often are those changes successful? And when they have an unsuccessful change, how often are those causing incidents? So we're really looking at things fairly holistically there, and identifying where maybe you might have someone pushing a change that has a low success record. Hey, you want to be aware of that. We also look at the historical incident risk. So this is, other similar changes in the past. When we've pushed those, what's happened? Have they been successful? That could be a similar change based on the CIs involved, or it could be similar in nature, meaning it's the same type of change. What happened when you push those? If those caused incidents, that's going to mean that we're going to say that, hey, there's a higher risk for this current change because changes like it have caused issues in the past. And then the final one is probably the most powerful, but also sometimes the hardest one to grasp, is what we call our organization-specific risk. And this is where you're able to specify, in plain kind of natural language, specific things that for your organization increase risk. So you could say things like, hey, if this is happening during handoff hours between my Asia and my US NOC teams, increase the risk, because things that happen right during that handover window, there's chances that someone won't realize they're responsible for watching this, and something gets missed, and then things go bad. So you could tell it, hey, if it's happening between this time frame, increase risk for this. Or, hey, if you see a change that is a security related change and there's not a sign off or approval from a VP of security, increase the risk. So there's different things like that you can give really specific feedback for our AI as we're assessing these changes to check for. I think one of my favorites I saw is one customer had, if a change references an attachment and there is no attached file, increase the risk and set it to basically a high risk. And believe it or not, I'm sure some of you've experienced this. They just have times where people maybe intended to include an attachment, reference it, and then they never actually attach the details of that. Maybe it's a backup plan or change plan. All those get weighted together, and that weighting is configurable. We have a standard kind of default, but you can change that. But what we do with that, once we get the risk scores, we actually take and have our AI explain in natural language, why is this considered risky? So we'll go through and give you very specific details on why something was risk rated the way it was. In this case, one of my favorites is, hey, in the past, when you did a change like this, there were issues when rolling restarts weren't performed, and it doesn't look like you're planning to do those rolling restarts based on your implementation plan. But we don't stop with just why it's risky. We also tell you what we think you can do to reduce the risk of this change causing an incident. So here is kind of the action for the change submitter is, hey, go update your change plan and plan to do those rolling restarts. Once the change has been pushed to your Redis cache, that's going to help you maintain your service availability throughout this change. So very practical, actionable steps that teams can take to reduce their risk. Now, a couple things I'll say. We don't just risk rate this once. You see here we have the risk rating history. We will assess this over time. So if you submit this change before it gets pushed, if somebody updates the change record, we will reassess the risk. So maybe that might lower the risk. Maybe they took a bunch of the actions we suggested. Now it's considered a lower risk. Or, hey, maybe they made a change and it actually increased the risk. So we are reassessing the risk when the change record is updated. And let me just pause here. So this is also, not only is this available here within our web application, but we do push this to other sources as well. You can send it via email, send it to other, to ITSM systems, etc. But I want to jump in and talk a little bit about not just how we score the risk for this individual change, but also how are we tracking analytics as it compares to all of the changes that were risk rated. So obviously there's this change here that we've risk rated, and we have our change analytics here, which is telling us Lots of good information. Some of it is for just kind of being aware of kind of how is your risk posture improving. So this one here shows you, hey, over time, in this case, I'm looking at the last 3 months, is my risk, the amount of risky changes, is that going down? Am I pushing less risky changes out? That's obviously the goal. We see things like, the team change health. So what are kind of the best performing teams? What are maybe the teams that are struggling the most? What are the teams that just have the highest volume of changes within your organization? Some good information there. But we also get into things like, what's the quality of our score? So we're trying to always measure and be aware of how well are we doing on the quality of our risk ratings. How accurately are we calling things and rating them? What's that risk rating look like? The rating that we give versus the actual incidents that are caused over time. Some of those teams causing the most incidents. And then we give you a breakdown of all the changes that we risk rated that caused incidents. And again, the goal here is these should all be, critical risk or, high risk, ones that we've identified that help your team then be aware of, hey, let's double click and jump into these. And hopefully you catch these and you mitigate the risk. But, if you push it anyway, despite being critical, that might cause an incident. The next piece is the flow analysis. And this is a really great way to look at essentially kind of a large set of information. And one of my favorite ways to look at this is kind of what are my incidents causing change? So here's some of my incidents causing, or changes causing incidents, I should say, sorry. And let me understand, what was the risk rating? Especially, I like this one, declared versus actuals. This is, what did the humans say the risk was? What did incident prevention say the risk was? And did they cause an incident? So again, just helping you understand kind of how things are performing. And this is very configurable, so you can add specific fields you want to look at, which really gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you're able to understand maybe how well you're performing, maybe if there's certain teams or areas that are struggling in the change process, getting some real nice data-driven insights into maybe where things are going wrong and what they might be able to do about that to improve it. The other piece is what we call prediction and tuning. And this is, if you recall when I mentioned about the risk weightings, so you can use our defaults out of the box, or you can tune, how much each of those 5 categories contributes to the overall risk score. This actually gives a little bit of a view into, maybe how you might want to adjust the risk score. So we look at all those incidents, if there are incidents that changes that we risk rated that cause incidents, we look at those to see, hey, how might we have identified those better if you adjusted some of the settings here for, how much the implementation risk versus the team and individual risk contributes to the overall risk score. So again, it's just a tool to help your teams as they try to think about the settings that they want to leverage to best be catching all of those kind of high risk incidents before they changes before they cause an incident. And then the last thing I'll mention is just around, there's this, we also make this all available via our API. So there's the ability to pull this information via the API as well to get those same risk assessments as you saw in the web app, all available via the API that we expose. Sorry, that's the wrong page. It's going to go back to here. So with that, I'll kind of pass things back to Katie, and I think we'll have a little bit of time here towards the end for any sort of questions that folks might have.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis. Just gonna share my screen again. Awesome. Yeah, thank you. That was a great demo. I really love to see the Sankey diagram that's showing what the risk rating was and then what the reality was. I'm sure that's enlightening for many organizations, and I'm sure that many organizations don't have any quantitative way to be able to show that today. So I think that's really interesting. We talked a little bit about one of our hospitality companies that is using this, but I wanted to spend a minute just talking about how we're seeing this in place at one of the healthcare services providers that we work with. They have been using incident prevention in the last year. They're an organization that I would say is definitely a very complex IT environment. They had a CAB stood up. They had a very traditional change management process, but what they were seeing was that change risks were very much, they're inconsistent. The change approval process was very inconsistent. There was a lot of human intervention and a human judgment, like everybody, where there's like typically that 7-question survey that folks will submit when their change is going through. This is something that they were dealing with, but they saw a lot of variability with it. And ultimately it was resulting in a lot of what they thought were low risk changes were resulting in incidents. And obviously that was a huge challenge for the organization, especially when they were seeing that it cost them about over $1 million per minute when they saw some of those incidents. So like this was a business impacting problem and they had to start to do something about it. And that's where incident prevention came in, and particularly change risk management, using all the functionality that you just saw that Travis shared. And now, very impressively, they're at a point where they're able to automatically assess 90% of the changes that their organization is pushing through, which is incredible. And that means that the other 10%, those are just the high risk, highest priority changes that deserve human attention in the CAB. That's what they're focusing on, right? So think about that. The 90%, now we're not bogging down the CAB with those, but that CAB also has the confidence because they have the change risk score, they have the clear reasoning, they know how to mitigate if there were to be some sort of issue. They have the full picture, so they have the confidence that those 90% of changes are going through and are truly low risk. And meanwhile, the developers behind those 90% of changes are also moving along. They're not blocked by the CAB, right? So I think it really just shows how that velocity helps to get through. And as a result, this organization has seen a 40% reduction in the change-related outages, which is equally, if not more impressive, just than the 90% being auto-assessed. And they translate that 40% reduction to about a $500 million reduction in risk exposure, which is really, really impressive. And so this is not a future use of AI, and this is something that is reality for many organizations and can be stood up relatively quickly in most organizations. You did probably just see a pop-up come up on your screen. We recently, or within the last couple of months, did put together a white paper around change management processes and how you can really de-risk that within your organization. It's really a double down of what you've heard us talk about today. If you'd like to download that, please click on the pop-up at the bottom of your screen. You can also always visit BigPanda.io to be able and go to our resources to be able to download that as well. We'd love to have you there. With that, we are just about at the end of our time. We do have a couple of minutes to take some questions. So why don't we do that? There's been a few that I'm seeing come through.
Oh, we lost your audio, Katie, right as you're asking the question.
Okay, am I back?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, first question for you, Travis. So our team lives in ServiceNow and Jira. How does BigPanda plug into those tools? And is it another dashboard that people have to go into and check? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. In fact, I should have showed that in the demo. Let me see if I can share my screen again here. And essentially, so we do have the ability to take that change assessment and push that to your kind of ITSM system. So you saw me looking at it here in the web app, but I actually have that same change record I was just looking at earlier. Here it is in ServiceNow. And the way we've configured it, it's all configurable, but I've configured that to post the risk assessment back to the work notes. So whenever we do a risk assessment, we'll post that to the work notes of the change record. All those same details that you saw in the web application, where we're telling you the overall risk score, the specific breakdown for each of those different kind of categories, our risk reasoning and suggested mitigation steps, all available. And then you can also actually push this actual numerical risk score. You can push that to any field in ServiceNow that's configurable that you can set up. So what we've seen, customers do is you can push that to a specific field, and then tie that into your change flow within ServiceNow, so that if it's risk rated, below a certain threshold, it gets automatically moved through to scheduled. Versus if it's a high risk change and above a certain threshold that you configure, it can be automatically flagged for CAB and automatically kind of held up so that the team can review those high risk changes, but then push the low risk changes through as quickly as possible.
Awesome. I know many folks live and breathe by their ITSM platform. They don't work anywhere else. And so it sounds so with this, they don't necessarily have to change their workflow. They can get all of this information directly in the ITSM console.
Yeah, and what we've seen a lot of customers do is maybe the CAB meeting might use that dashboard in the Biggie web app or in our web application.
Yep.
But then the actual change submitters, the people working those changes day in and day out, they're working out of their ITSM system. So it's good to have it in both places.
Yep. Very much makes sense. Another question here. Does BigPanda's AI need a ton of historical data to be useful, or can it start surfacing meaningful risk signals early on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with a lot of, I'd say traditional ML type, applications, you have to have some period where you're observing data as it comes in before you can start making sort of classifications, assessments like what you saw.
Yep.
That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing with incident prevention and specifically change risk is using large language models. So it's basically looking at every single change, reading the record like a person would. And then it's leveraging all of that BigPanda IT knowledge graph that you mentioned earlier as insight into how it assesses and understands the risk. So the nice thing is as we pull in the data and set up the ITKG, once we enable change risk, the same day we enable it, we start risk rating changes right away and seeing value from it. So it's literally when we turn it on.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for sharing. Another question. A lot of our changes are placeholders for GitHub code changes. Will this be able to assess the risk of those accurately?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's definitely, increasingly the case that people are pushing things through CI/CD. And so one of the new features that we've actually recently released is the ability to essentially, as a part of your configuration, define other destinations where we should pull in relevant context when doing an assessment. So in the case of something like GitHub, you could point us towards the GitHub APIs, and so we could actually go pull that information. So if we see here's a change record, it references a PR, it could essentially take that information, go find the PR via the API, and then leverage that as a part of the risk rating. So it makes sure that even if the record in ITSM is maybe just a placeholder, it gets the relevant context it needs from the data source. Some other interesting things we've seen customers do with that would be like health checks. So you can tie it to observability. So you might want to maybe go check and see what's the error rate, what's the health of the hosts or the CIs that we're about to push this change to. If they're really unhealthy, that might be a riskier change because that change could make that be the thing that pushes those over the edge into a full-blown incident. So lots of interesting ways to leverage that by pulling in, I would say, additional relevant context that really traditionally doesn't get considered by some of these kind of risk assessments.
Yeah, great answer. Really interesting. Last question here. And so it says, what data is required to get the AI analysis? And I'll add to it, I guess, what are the data points that you're using to inform that change risk score?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'd say the root of it would be your ITSM data. So we're looking at, the change data, incident, problem data. But then obviously more data that we have provides more insight and information. So, when we have things like knowledge-based articles, wikis, kind of information like that, that's highly relevant. We'll also pull things from, like I mentioned, other data sources. So if you want to be doing health checks before you push changes, then it'd be, tying in real time to like different observability tools. So we could fetch that information for the real-time assessment. So I'd say there's very much kind of a core set of data, which is that ITSM data, but anything that builds on top of that really enriches the quality of that risk assessment because it helps bring the full holistic picture. And so that's something we see a lot of customers go through. Is a bit of a journey with how they get there. Some move quicker and others move slower, but typically, everyone starts with the ITSM data that I mentioned. And then, once they do that, they want to add more data, give it more context and more information. And so then they kind of move along that journey.
So there's a lot of data that you can add to increase your sophistication, but at a baseline, the ITSM data is the critical data for this incident prevention and change risk management.
And that really lets you get started out the gate, and then you can continue to build on that over time.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Travis. Those are some great answers. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. Appreciate that. And with that, we have really come to the end of our time. So thank you all for joining. We appreciate it. And
all right. Well, Katie, Travis, I will also thank each of you for joining us for today's webinar. And for everyone who stuck around and was involved in the webinar, I also want to thank you for joining this and remind you that we do have that survey on the right side of your screen. Go ahead and fill that out. It's 3 quick, easy questions, and you will receive a copy of today's recording in your inbox shortly after we conclude. And I look forward to seeing everyone on the next Tech Strong Learning Experience. Have a great day, everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.